Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about It Was All a Dream, an anthology of bad horror tropes done right, edited by Brandon Applegate from Hungry Shadow Press. There's their logo there, and a very cool, very cool cover, in my opinion. As the cover says, an anthology of bad horror tropes done right. So essentially, all of these different authors, and we'll get to some of them in just a moment, have taken tropes that we've seen over and over and over again and put their own personal spin on them to make them a little more surprising, essentially. And we have tons of different authors in here. From Aaron Keating to Eric Ragland, Laurel Hightower, Alex Woodrow, Haley Piper, Gabino Iglesias, Gemma Files, Tom Coombe, Madison McSweeney, Aaron Brown. I'm not going to name everybody that's in here. You can pause the video and read that, or just look it up on Amazon. So right off the bat, as with pretty much every anthology that's ever put out, this is a mixed bag. But I will say for this book, these stories range from good to great. I don't think there's a bad story in here, which you can get with an anthology, of course. You know, sometimes you just run across a story you don't like, or it doesn't work, or whatever. Everything in here really interesting, and the stories also range from horrifying and sickening to lighthearted and funny, which I really enjoy a good lighthearted horror story, if that makes sense. You know, horror comedy. It's a balancing act, but when done right, I really enjoy it. So just some highlights before I get to just the highlights. Every single story starts with a little illustration. Beautiful illustrations before every story, which is just, it's a bonus. It's fantastic. You know, you don't need that in a book like this. You just publish the stories, but man, it's so nice to have these great pictures. So, that being said. Oh, and it does have an introduction from Laird Barron. Or forward, excuse me. So, table of contents, so I can just take a quick look here. First of all, my absolute favorite story in this whole book is Fuck This Shit Manor by Laurel Hightower. Absolutely amazing, hilarious story, taking the trope of the really inexpensive rental property or house that, you know, some poor person can't believe they're getting such a deal. We're reading horror. We know why they're getting such a deal. Takes that whole idea and really does something fun with it. So fuck this shit manor. I mean, you should be able to tell from the title that this is going to be a wild story, and it's really fun. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. But Bloody Nights at Hippie Cliffs is a fun take on the slasher trope, and well, I don't want to say. I don't want to be wrong about the other thing. I could look in the back. There are notes on the stories in the back. Maybe I will. Let's see, just to see what the author themselves have to say. Deals with two tropes. The first involves characters who have sex being doomed to a gruesome death. And the second trope involves the killer coming back to life after what was surely a fatal blow. So essentially both slasher tropes. See, and I would have been wrong. I was gonna put my own little spin on one of the tropes, but and I will say, from a production standpoint, I do wish the story notes were after each story. They're all in the back, and being an old man whose memory isn't what it used to be, I do find that if I read through the whole book and then I start reading the story notes, it's not horrible because it should be obvious from the story notes which story they're talking about, but they're not fresh in my head anymore. Of course, the last couple stories are, because I've finished the book and now I'm reading the story notes. So just personally, my own personal thing, and this in no way affects the score of the book or my enjoyment of the book, but I personally prefer the story notes being after each story. I did go finish the story, go to the back of the book and read the story notes before I started the next story. But anyway, so yeah, we've got these different things. Don't Say Its Name deals with indigenous. I think I have this correctly. Basically, indigenous mythologies, for lack of a better way to put it, and their appropriation. I could be completely wrong about that again, but it does deal with Ish, one of my favorite monsters. I will also say that some of the tropes dealt with in these stories were incredibly obvious. Some I didn't know what tropes the author was dealing with until I read those story notes, and then I could go, oh, okay. Some of them I wouldn't necessarily see as tropes, but I don't have the same experience as everybody else. Advent of the Clown King, a lot of fun. Don't Go in the Woods, or Do, See If I Care, another really fun one dealing with the trope of the crazy person warning the teenagers away. We saw this sort of turned on its head in Cabin in the Woods, if you've seen that movie, but it's, Crazy Ralph in Friday the 13th, and you know the character. If you're a fan of horror movies, especially slashers, you should be familiar with this character. This, again, takes that trope, puts a spin on it. It was really fun. And, all right, let me just double check that I'm talking about the correct story here. Yes. Hail Mary Full of Rage by J.V. Gax? Not sure. It's Gachs. Loved this story. Possibly my second favorite in the whole thing. Dealing with, dealing with religious things. Let's just put it that way. I don't want to give anything away because I'm going to recommend this book and I don't want to spoil anything. But Hail Mary Full of Rage, really, really liked the story and where it went. Let's see, where's Gabino Iglesias? Gone in a Flash. Man, Gabino writes some dark, dark stuff, and this is no different. Really great story, but it's dark, which is one of the reasons it's great. The Pizza Curse, a lot of fun, dealing with a couple different tropes. Not gonna say what they are, but it's got a title. The title, The Pizza Curse. Come on. How can you not want to read that? Anyway, I'm not gonna go through every single freaking story. But Hollywood Hollywood Werewolf Conspiracy, Haley Piper, another really, really good one. Dealing with, well, again, certain tropes that should be familiar to most fans of horror. So, hopefully I've given you a little taste. Hopefully I've piqued your interest. Hopefully you're going to go out and find your own copy of It Was All a Dream, an anthology of bad horror tropes done right. I gave it 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. I'd round it up to 4.5. As I said, I thought every story was good. Some of the stories are great. None of the stories are bad, which is a little redundant since I already said all of the stories are good. By implication, none of the stories are bad. Yeah, it's a great short story collection, and as it's, I guess it's sort of meta for horror fans. You got a zombie anthology. You're reading zombie stories. You've got a werewolf, a vampire anthology. You're reading vampire stories, werewolf stories. Hopefully, things that are good, things that are different. This, by its very nature, is a meta work. It's taking not a creature, but a concept, if that makes sense. And I like that. And yet, while a few of the stories are very playful with this idea, most of them I think are pretty straightforward in their storytelling. And so the meta-ness of it doesn't get in the way of any of it. And these most if not all of these stories could easily fit in other anthologies or other things, because they are good stories. And I think if they were, with a few exceptions, I think if they were in other, say, different anthologies of any type, you wouldn't necessarily read it and go, oh, this is subverting a trope. There are a couple that very much clearly are doing that. But the others, knowing that they're in this anthology, we know that they're subverting tropes. But I think if you read them elsewhere, you wouldn't necessarily know that. If does any of this make sense? All of this is to say, I really, really liked this. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Only 4 on Goodreads because you can't do halves. I recommend it. It's good stuff. A lot of great authors in here. As with most anthologies that I read, I did note some of the authors that I wasn't familiar with, so that I can find their other work and check it out, because I was impressed. Laurel Hightower's absolutely fantastic. So good. And a bunch of the others, but I just love that story. So there you have it. It Was All a Dream, an anthology of bad horror tropes done right. Edited by Brandon Applegate from Hungry Shadow Press. Question for this video: what is your favorite and or least favorite horror trope? For me, I did not think ahead, so I don't have an answer at the ready. I don't like the sequel baiting endings that a lot of horror stories have, just because they don't necessarily feel like a natural progression. and I believe that's addressed in one of these stories. I think you can have a sequel. If your franchise or if your movie makes billions of dollars and you decide you got to make a sequel to it, I think there are ways to do it without pre-sequeling. Throwing in that scene at the very end or that mid-credit or post-credit scene that says, "Hey, potential for a sequel," which usually is showing that the killer isn't dead or whatever. It can be well done, but we don't need it. If you're a good storyteller, you can do a sequel without having to prepare us for it. On the other hand, sort of in that vein, I do like, let's say, the ending of Halloween, which apparently there were no plans for any type of sequel. And you still had what could be considered sequel bait with spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the original Halloween. Loomis shoots Michael Myers. Michael Myers falls off the balcony, lands on the ground. They see him down there. Loomis, does he even console Laurie Strode? But they talk. They look back outside. I believe, it's been a while since I've watched the original. I believe when they look back outside, he's gone, right? In the original. I know that's the case in part 2 because that's the sequel. But in the original, isn't he gone? Even though there were no plans for a sequel. I do like when a creator has sort of that open-ended ending when there are no plans to continue. It's just, oh shit, this isn't over. Too bad you're never going to hear the rest of the story. Except then, of course, at least in the case of Hollywood, if something makes money, they're going to beat a dead horse, no pun intended, beat a dead Michael Myers or a dead Jason or whatever it happens to be. Does any of this make sense? Am I rambling? As I said, I did not bother to think ahead on this question, but let me know about the tropes that you love and hate in the comments below. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is EricSmith5757. That's Eric with a K. ERIKSMITH5757. That's all I have. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.